Video, we're going to get started working in Style3D. I have Style3D opened here. I'm logged in, and I'm going to start putting a garment on this avatar so that we can start playing around. If you have anything open right now, you can just hit File, New Project, and get a new file going. If you don't already have an avatar in the workspace, we're going to address that really quickly. I want to make sure that I have my Select Move tool chosen for right now, so as I work, I have the right tool in hand. On the left-hand side, I have my 2D workspace. On the right-hand side, I have my 3D workspace, including the avatar, the garment, and a bunch of other 3D features that we'll be talking about later on in training. To the left of each of these windows, we have a view menu, and these items allow us to show or hide certain elements about the 2D or 3D workspace. Anything from the name of the piece to the texture to other elements that are available on the 2D pattern, and visuals of the 3D like the texture, the polygon mesh of the avatar or of the garment, and other, again, features that we'll get into further into training. If you don't have an avatar already in the scene, if you click over on your current tab to the right-hand side, you can see that there's an avatar button at the bottom of this list. You can see I have Nana installed. I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I'm also just going to load a new avatar. So this button that I clicked here is the resource library. And when I open the resource library, I'm able to see files that exist on my workstation. So these are things that are saved to my disk currently, and I can load more from Style3D Cloud directly into this area, to the storage area. I can choose specifically garments, avatars, fabrics, graphic elements, trims, or even background scenery. I'm going to start with avatar, and you can see I have a few items already in here. I can open up female and choose female.savt that I have here, Nana. And I can click the blue icon with the down pointing arrow, and that allows me to download other assets. And right now, you're probably not going to have very much under this tab, but under Official Market, you'll have access to everything in the Style3D Cloud library. And you can choose avatars, avatar accessories like hair and shoes, or you can choose poses like what you see here. I'm going to choose category, and again, if that's not available to you, you just click this collapse or expand filter button to make sure you can see this. And you're going to click category, avatar, and that allows you to select an avatar. Keep in mind that hair elements may not be as you see them in the image. Hair is a separate object. The avatar here is the body itself. So you can pull from this library. You can just click on an avatar and click download. That'll load it into this area where you can open them up. Again, we're just going to choose female, female.savt, and reopening it won't do anything different to my screen. It opens Nana here, and I can rotate around the workspace with my mouse. There are some keyboard shortcuts and some mouse gestures that you're going to want to memorize. We'll start with left mouse button. Left mouse button allows you to select in the 2D workspace. We'll be talking more about 2D selection as we get into pattern edits. On the 3D workspace, I have the ability to left mouse button to select objects. There are none currently other than the avatar, but I can click to highlight an object. And as I highlight an object, the property editor lights up with a bunch of different variables that I can alter as needed. I can right click once, and that'll allow me to make changes using the context menu, or I can right click an empty space and I get a different set of options. If I right click and hold, I'm able to pivot around the avatar. If I use the middle mouse button, and not every mouse has this, but especially on Mac, you may need a separate mouse that has a middle mouse button, and that allows you to pan around. I can also do that in the 2D workspace. Keyboard shortcuts to remember are on if you have a number pad on your keyboard, they'll make the most sense there, but the top row of numbers on your keyboard will also work. Number 2 is a front view. Number 8 is a rear view. 4 is left side. 6 is right side. 5 is top down. 0 is bottom up. And again, 2 to bring it back to the default. Next up, we're going to get a garment loaded up so that we can add it to the scene, get it dressed on the avatar, and get a simulation going. We have a couple files that come with Style3D when you install it. Again, if you click on the resource library here, you'll be able to see the files that exist currently. I'm going to click over to the garment tab in this window. And I have a couple more files than what you will have by default. You're going to have male and female t-shirt. I'm going to load up this garment. And again, we're just going to hit open. We'll say OK. And that brings the shirt into the scene. I can close this. Just know that if you have this window in your workspace covering the 3D window, you may not see something get added. So I'm going to close this once it's done. We already have the garment in the scene. And immediately we can just click over here in the top, simulate, to get this garment simulated on the body. I can also tap the space bar to start and stop simulating. I'm going to do that by clicking once here. You see the garment immediately simulated onto our avatar. Now, you'll notice that the pieces were already stitched together and pre-positioned around the body. You may not already have your garment set up that way. When you download assets from the cloud or you get assets built by somebody else, they may already be moved, or you may have to reposition pieces in 3D space and stitch them together so that the simulation works. Now that the garment is simulating, again, I'll just click to get the simulation going or hit the space bar to start or stop. I have this little icon that tells me I can actually pinch and drag fabric while the garment is in simulation mode. I am in select move mode just to make sure that I have the right tool selected so that I don't have another tool in hand. I'm just going to click and drag while simulation is running, and you can see I can actually move and reposition the garment live. I can rotate, I can pull on the fabric to see what that does. If I ever get off center, or if I want to bring my avatar back to the default position, I can just hit 2 and the screen will center back on the avatar. I can also click somewhere and you can see that little blue dot. I can also type while that blue dot is on the garment. I can tap F. It'll actually center the camera on that location on the garment. So I can click here and hit F and it'll reposition the camera, and now it's centered on that. That can be very helpful for trying to locate and zoom in on a detail that you want that may otherwise require lots of rotating and panning to get to. So if I want to see something here, I can just hit F, and now I know I'm locked on that position. So it's easy to get to a view where I can see what's going on there. Okay. What I'm going to do now is bring the pattern back to a state that you'll probably be getting most 2D data in. If you're importing a DXF file or from anywhere else really, you'll need to set the pattern up if it's the first time it's being worked on in 3D. To do that, what I'm going to do is remove the existing stitching, and I'm also going to reposition the pieces in space. So I'll just say reset 3D arrangement, and that brings the pieces out to the flat pane in front of the avatar. This is how they'll appear by default when you first open a pattern for the first time. I'm going to click on Edit Sewing, and that's going to allow me to select every stitch and delete them. I can hit the backspace key if I'm on a Mac, or I can hit delete. Either way will allow me to erase these connections. I'm going to undo one step, and I can hit Control Z or Command Z, depending on your operating system, or I can hit undo or redo from up here. I'm going to do that once, Command Z, and now I can see all my stitches. I'm still in Edit Sewing mode. So what I can do here is I can click on one individual one and highlight it, and I can press back or delete to delete it. Or I can drag a box around an object or multiple objects and highlight all of them and delete them. So I'm going to do that for everything. Delete all the stitch connections. And then I'm going to do basically all the work that would have needed to be done to get the pieces around the body. For that, I'm going to turn on this option, Show Arrangement Points. And what arrangement points do is allow me to quickly position pieces around the body. This can normally, without these tools, be a lot of work and be quite confusing. These tools are made to make that process really simple. So there are invisible cylinders placed around the body, and these dots indicate multiple locations where you could potentially place a piece. If I have my Select Move tool highlighted or selected, I'm going to click on a piece to highlight it. And you can see as I mouse over individual dots, it gives me a preview of where that piece will end up if I click. So I found a location that I think works for me, maybe a little bit higher. Click up there. And I can continue to do that for all of my other pieces. See here that I have a back piece. I'm going to click on the back piece, try out a couple options. I like that one, and I'll click to position it. If I want to do additional positioning, I can do that. You can see here that I have what's called a gizmo, and this allows me to move in the X, Y, or Z axes, or I can click on the little square here to move freely in space, or I can rotate using these handles here as well. I'm going to go ahead and select my sleeves and get them placed around the arm, and because these pieces are duplicated, there's a connection between these two pieces, which we'll talk about later in training as well. When you assign one, the opposite side gets assigned as well. And we're just going to select this neckband piece and place it around the neck. If we wanted to, we can rotate. So maybe I want this neckband to actually open on the side instead of directly in the back. I'll just choose which side I want that piece centered on. So I'll click on the neckband. I'll click on this side, and you'll see the opening is now on the left-hand side. And that's all we need to do with these arrangement points for right now. So we can turn them back off. And now we just have the pieces pre-positioned for 3D. We can still click on a piece and move it around without the benefit of those arrangement points. And if we ever need to, we can reset the position for one or all of these pieces, or we can make minor adjustments to their position manually. We're going to edit some sewing. We're actually going to make new sewing segments since there are none. And there's segment sewing and there's free sewing. We're going to use largely segment sewing for this, since it is the simplest method of sewing. It allows me to select one seam and then another to sew it together. Now, when I click, you can see there's a little downward pointing arrow. I want to make sure that whatever direction that arrow is pointing, it's pointing the same direction on the corresponding side. If I click here and click here, I can see that those stitches are pointing the same direction, and I can double check them in the 3D window, and I can see those lines indicating that that stitch looks good. And because I have the side seam mirrored again, I don't have to worry about the other side. Now, I could have made a mistake like this one, where I have this connecting to this. And because I want them to be facing the same direction, I look at them and do this, right? If I have both arrows pointing this direction, it won't work because one of these pieces is actually flipped compared to the other. So we have this incorrect connection here where one of these stitches needs to be modified. You can go back and undo and redo that. The way to do that with undo, or after you've undone, is you can click on that line and then make sure that when you highlight the next line, that you end up closer to the one of these sides or the other. So when you move your mouse to one side or the other, that changes the direction of the stitch. And you can actually see in this window what that does. And I can even stitch directly in here. So this can be very helpful if I'm working with complex stitch connections and I don't quite know on the pattern where I'm working. Being able to highlight in either the 2D and end in the 3D, or start and end in the 3D, or start and end in the 2D. There are really powerful ways of being able to connect these pieces together without a lot of confusion. I can just click and click to complete that stitch. I have another segment that I want sewn, and I'm just going to double check as I'm doing this. If I see that crossing over, I know that something's probably wrong with my positioning. So I just want to make sure my mouse is on the right side before I complete that stitch. Another thing I can do is go into edit sewing, and that allows me to modify an existing sewing segment. I can click on it, this one or this one. I can just right click on it and I can do some changes to it. I can say that I want to delete it entirely, or I want to reverse the sewing. And this is the thing you may end up doing the most with this right click menu. It's just flipping the direction of stitches if you find that they're crisscrossed. Segment sewing works for 2-point line segments that are very simple to connect to one another, where the line measurements are either very close or identical. For something like a sleeve where there's ease included and there's a couple extra notches, there's a better tool for this called free sewing. And that allows you to select, using points, the beginning and end of a line. So let's say I want to select this segment from the back half of my sleeve to the notch in the center. I can click and drag to this location, click to finish, and then tell the system what I want that to connect to. In that case, I'm going to select here to here. I'm going to do the same thing for the front segment, here to here, or I can go backwards. I can say I want to go from here to here, and have the corresponding connection. Either direction, you'll be okay. And you can, if you make any mistakes, always come back in here and go into edit sewing and flip a segment by reversing it. Looks like Command B is also the shortcut for that. We're going to complete the sewing using segment sewing again. I'll select this individual side seam for these two pieces and make sure my directions are correct. I'm going to do something fancier for my front seam here. What I'm going to do is hold my Shift key down, and that allows me to group multiple line segments together while still keeping in the segment sewing tool. I could alternatively use the free sewing tool, but I'd still need to hold Shift to say I want to group this line and connect it to this line. So let's do that using segment sewing. I'm going to hold the Shift key. I'm going to make sure that my line direction stays consistent throughout the entire time. You can see that little arrow. I'm going to make sure that the arrow is left pointing every time. So I'm going to hold the Shift key down, click to select this first group, and then again, make sure that my arrow is on the correct side of the line, closer to where the last line ended. Click. And I'll continue that until I've selected all 4 parts of the neckband or neckline. Now I'm going to move my mouse over the line that it's going to end up on. And you can see again, if I move my mouse left or right, it will show me what it looks like if I had the stitches flipped or if I have them oriented correctly. You can see this is why it's important to have pieces close to one another in the 2D workspace, because it makes it easier to see that, yes, in this case, my front neckline will be stitched correctly. And when I click to complete this, it is indeed correctly stitched. I can then hit simulate to let the simulation happen again, and there we are back where we were with the original garment. This will allow you to get a garment stitched together and on the body in Style3D Studio. Now on to some more fun stuff. We're going to go over here to the current tab. We're going to click on fabric so we can see what's available here. We're going to open the resource library once more. When we choose fabrics, we can see again a bunch of materials that exist already that are saved to my computer. We also have assets that are maybe part of my organization but aren't downloaded to my computer. And we also have the option to download online assets. And just like we did with avatars, open up files that are saved on the cloud and load them into our workstation here. Again, here are materials that may be part of your organization or materials you've worked with previously. Under official fabrics, we have the entire library of new materials. And there are other elements that are not fabric in here as well. But mostly you're going to be looking for fabric. You'll see they give you a preview of every fabric, including the physical properties of each one. So bendy materials will be more resistant to bend. Stretchier materials will appear more stretchy. Shiny materials will appear shiny. And things that are furry will appear with their fur texture. You can select as many of these as you want and download them. They may take some time to complete downloading, but once they are there, they'll be loaded to your computer. You won't need to download them again to use them. You could also use Substance materials if you're using Substance3D to author or you have access to the Substance library. You can download those files and load them directly into Style3D. You can drag and drop them or load them into the resource library. I'm going to pick Cotton Stripe. And you can see when I double click on that, it added the resource. I can say OK, and I'm going to close it. To add this cotton to my pieces, I can just click and drag onto an individual piece, and you can see it automatically updated with that texture. It also automatically updated with the physical properties, and because the garment was still in simulation mode, you noticed it moved a little bit because that material, this cotton, actually has the physical properties of cotton. I can continue clicking and dragging, or I can highlight the entire 2D work area and then drag that texture onto them. And then all of those pieces are updated. Now I can, because I've done that, every other material that was used has been replaced. So I can actually right click on this tile here and I can delete any unused fabrics. So now I only have that one cotton material. If I wanted to have maybe sleeves that had a different material and maybe the neck uses a rib, I could load up multiple different fabrics And I can go into resource library and I'll look for rib. And I do have a rib knit. I'll load that up. And let's go with a different material for my sleeves. I'll download something really quickly. I'll just select a material from this library. Maybe I want the same material, but I want a copy of it that's a slightly different color. So I'll do that by dragging it in here again. And now I have a second instance of the same cotton material. So now I can close this out. And I'm going to start making some changes to these materials so I can see the visual difference while I work on them. Down here, I have the property editor, and this allows me to make all sorts of changes to my material, both physical and optical. And I have the ability to choose the type of material it is in terms of construction. I can also choose how the fabric appears from front, back, or side views. Right now I'm concerned with the front view, and I can see that this stripe texture is here, but I want it to be a different color. So I'm going to click on the color. And right now there's no color applied, but if I change the color to a gray, you can start seeing the preview being changed over here in this tile. There are two ways that we can apply a recoloring. You can use two different blending modes, either a multiply mode or a recolor mode. And you can see recolor operates slightly differently from the other mode. So we're going to hit OK once we've chosen another color. And with this recolored tile, what we can do is just drag it onto pieces that we want to replace. And again, if we were using our select tool, we can highlight multiple pieces. I just use the shift key there to select two pieces that are apart from one another. And I can drag that tile onto either one of them, and they'll both be updated with that color. Now I see the rib also needs the new material, so I'm going to drop the rib knit on that piece, and you can see it's automatically applied with its physical properties as well. Now there's a lot more that you can do with materials. Down here under the property editor, I have a lot more options for changing the appearance of the material. I can make it glossy or metallic, I can make it transparent, or I can give it a bump. There are lots of settings here, and there are lots of pre-made materials on Style3D Cloud. There's also the Style3D Fabric application, which we'll be talking about in a separate training, where you can digitize, author, and manage new materials all in one application. The next thing we're going to do here is make some changes to the style, and there are a couple ways we can do that really quickly. I'm going to go over here to the Edit Pattern tool, and once I've selected this tool, I can actually click and drag around a number of points to edit them. You notice that because all of these lines were in that selection box, they were highlighted. And I selected from left to right. And I did that by clicking and holding, dragging my mouse, and then releasing. Now, if I go the opposite direction and click, hold, and release, it actually selects everything that the line touched. So there are two different selection modes, and this mode will select anything that is completely enclosed in the marquee box. With these lines selected, we can just click and drag and move our line up and around, and you can see that we can actually edit both pieces at once. While I'm making this change, what I'm going to do is make sure I have the shift key held down. What that'll do is ensure that my movement stays vertical rather than shifting off to the side a little bit. And I can actually right click at any point to pull up the moving distance dialog box. And this allows me to specify how far I want the movement to be. If I had just used my left mouse button, it would have dropped it wherever it was on the screen. Here, I can actually choose that I want it to drop maybe 2 inches from where I started. I can say OK. And you can see the new piece has been adjusted. And I can hit play again to start the simulation again. Now we're going to add a new fabric to this style. We're going to open up the resource library to do that. We're going to pick something new. We're going to load that into our design. Now what we'll do is we'll start separating these pieces. So I'm going to grab the pen tool, and I'm going to grab the notch. And because the notch is a snap location, I can actually just drag my mouse close to it, and it snaps right to it. And I can create a line in the style anywhere I want. What's nice about this is I can actually switch back over to the 3D view again and just visually decide where I want that style line to go. If I wanted to go with a curved line, I can do that as well. I can create the same selection, hold the Command key, and that allows me to create a curved line. And again, double click allows me to drop that line wherever I want. Now that that line is there, I can go to the Edit Pattern tool. I can right click on the line, and I can either use the Cut function, which will separate these pieces on both sides, but it won't automatically create stitch connections between the pieces. There's no stitch there. However, if we go back a couple steps, we can use Edit Pattern, right click, Cut and Sew. And this time when it creates the separation, it will automatically include the stitch relationship between those two pieces. Now that our new material is here, what we'll do is just drag in laser 1. We can see that we've applied a completely new material to this piece. Do the same thing to the opposite side. Now we're going to add a graphic. To do that, we're going to click on the graphic tab over here on the right side of our screen. And we can double click on a graphic to get it in our hand. And what we have here is a preview of the size of this graphic, both on 3D and on 2D. And again, you can place on either side. And this acts like a stamp tool. So wherever I click, it's going to drop that image. So if I click right up here, it'll drop the Style3D. And if we wanted to, we can continue placing elsewhere on the pattern. I can just hit Command Z or Control Z if I want to back out and undo any of that. Now, when I double clicked on the graphic, it automatically selected the graphic placement tool or insert graphic tool. And there it allows me to start seeing where that image is going to go. If I want to edit something that's already on there, I can click Transform Graphic and select an image that's already on the pattern. Once I've selected it, you can see it gives me some corner handles so I can scale the image. And I can also use around the edge here, this ring, to start rotating the image however I want. I can also click and drag to move it somewhere else on the garment. You can also bring new graphics in. If I open File, I can actually load in other graphics, like ones I've downloaded from Canva. I go into my drive where I have them saved and open them up. I'm actually going to open up all but the 5th one. And you can see they get loaded automatically into the system. I could alternatively open up Finder or Explorer in Windows and drag my graphic into this graphic workspace. If I try to import a graphic and drag it directly into this workspace onto a piece, it's going to ask me what kind of material I'm making it. In this case, it's asking for the maps you would need to make a fabric. And those are a little bit different. So we're going to back out of that. Instead, we're just going to double click on one of the ones that we do want to add, and we can click and add those wherever we like. Buttons work in a very similar way, as do the other element types. For every element, there's going to be a default object that already lives in that tab. So when I click on button, I do automatically have a default button type. And just like I did with the graphics, I can just double click on this and it loads up the tool that I would use to place buttons. And you can see that little dot is where the button would be centered. So if I click here, it creates a button. And again, it's like a stamp tool. So it'll place it wherever I click. So when I have a button placed, I can actually select the button and change the style of button by going into the button library here. It's a little down arrow to the right. When I click on that, it allows me to choose a completely different style. So maybe I want to use this type or a different shape entirely. I could also load an OBJ if I have my own hardware. Those can be loaded into the system as well. And again, this affects the entire group. So the next time I place one, it'll be the same button type. It's the same story for buttonholes. We can double click on the default buttonhole object, choose where we want that to go. We can even choose a different type if there are any in our system. Right now there are none, but we can alter the style by changing the color in here. The zipper object type has lots of customization options. We can change everything from the type of teeth to the stripe or tape, the zipper slider, the zipper puller object, and the top and bottom stoppers. Each element has its own properties, and we can change them however we'd like. We can change the colors, we can change the finishes, and we can scale them however we want to. We're going to jump straight ahead to top stitches. When we double click on this object type, again, we can change things like color. We can also change the type of stitch that we would be using. So right now, everything is a single thread chain stitch. We can use a zigzag chain stitch, and that'll change the stitch type. Now this top stitch type hasn't been applied to anything. So the same rule goes for this. We're going to double click the top stitch tile here, and that opens up the tool or starts selecting the tool that we need to apply top stitching to the pattern. Here I'm going to select a box around everything that I want that zigzag stitch to apply to. In this case, I'm just going to add it to everything. So when I release my mouse, you can see the lines that have been highlighted in 2D and on 3D. And again, you can zoom in and see the effect of that zigzag. We can change the spec of the stitch from common specs of zigzags and other types, or we can change the stitch type altogether. And when we do that, everything that's got this top stitch applied to it will change. If we want to have two different kinds of stitching, we can just add a new style by hitting add, double clicking on it, and changing its style like we did for the first one. There's also puckering, which works very similarly to the way that top stitching works. Again, there's a default. Again, double clicking on it gives you the tool that allows you to add a pucker effect to whatever you want to, and dragging a box either left to right or right to left allow you to select certain lines and apply that puckering style to it. And again, every object in the property editor can be modified. Trim works very similarly to buttons. Those can be 3D objects that you import or things that you've downloaded from Style3D Cloud. And avatars. There's a lot that can be changed in avatars. We're going to cover it pretty quickly. For right now, I'm going to right click and I'm going to hide all patterns and hit 2 so that we can focus on the avatar. When we click on avatar, we have the option to choose from different configurations. But you can see that the body shape was the same. All that's changed is skin and hair. What we'll do here is, again, select it, and you can go into the property editor and make manual adjustments to things like the accessories and shoes and hair and even skin. And you can even get into really granular changes. But we've created an avatar editor to make this really simple. So when you click Edit Avatar from just underneath the name, you have this dialog box. And this allows you to see all the measures on size, measures of the avatar. You can choose from sizes that exist already, or you can load or save new avatars to match your size spec. Under faces, we can load new face configurations, and those are truly different faces. We have another option down here for emotion that covers facial expression. So we have default, angry, and other emotions that can be downloaded and loaded onto the avatar. We also have skin options for with and without undergarments, hair options that can be chosen with a double click. And again, everything can be downloaded or imported from outside systems, and accessories are the same, where we can again load them from Style3D Cloud and just double click them to load them up. Everything in here can be modified, so we can actually take these shoes if we want to, and we can recolor them to match whatever garment. Under pose, we have a number of default poses to work with, including T and A poses, which are common for the first steps of starting simulating your garments. I pose and other fashion poses are also available once you've got the garment dressed on the avatar. And you can also change hand poses for one or the other hand. So you can say right hand is open, left hand isn't, and modify them that way. You can even get in here in this view and make manual adjustments to the positioning and posing, but there's already a lot of assets in the library that you can work with without having to get very precise, but you can if you'd like to. We also have animations, and these animations allow you to have the avatar walk in a straight line or in a T. And we'll get into that in advanced stages of training. Here you can see the arrangement points, and these were the invisible cylinders I was talking about earlier when I was saying that you are placing pieces around the body. These are the shapes that control those arrangement points. So if there's an arrangement point that you want, if you're working with specialty garments and you find yourself constantly having to reuse special placements, these can be added. Luckily, you don't need to see them all the time, so we'll just turn them off here. We'll also turn this view off. Now we can just quickly talk about a couple of other functions in Style3D. We have, like we did for top stitching and for puckering, we have the ability to add piping. Again, these work exactly the same way, where you select a piping, you say where you want it to go, and you can change its properties in the property editor.